Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Georg Mack Plays the Classics, ranking October 1990. Find your favorite character in Sesame Street, Big Bird's Hide and Speak. We've come to the first talking game for the NES. Sure, we've had voice samples before, but here the gameplay revolves around Big Bird talking at you. There are 6 modes that all play exactly the same. Gameplay revolves around picking one of 4 windows in an apartment complex. Depending on the mode, you need to choose the character that Big Bird wants, or you need to remember which of the 4 windows they are behind. Then these modes happen with the characters holding letters. Okay, introduce letters to the kids, that's fine, I guess. The next mode has you spelling 3-letter words that Big Bird tells you.
The first letter in can.
The final mode has you making as many 3-letter words as you can before the sun goes down. If you're wrong, Big Bird asks you to try again.
That's the count. Find Bert.
When you complete your task, one of the Muppets walk out and perform an animation for you. They're animated well, but that's your only reward.
Let's play again.
I'd really rather not, Big Bird. When it comes to grading Sesame Street, Big Bird's Hide and Speak on NES, graphics get a 1.0. I like that the graphics are big and animated. Sound gets a 2.0. The voice samples are clear, and this is a great tech demo for them. Gameplay gets a 0. If I could move my cursor in the opposite direction, this would have received a 0.5. Difficulty gets a 0. Name or find that character or letter.
Now,
Fun factor gets a 0. I don't think children would even like this. Overall, Sesame Street Big Bird's Hide and Speak earns a 0.6 and gets a D-. If it wasn't for the audio samples and entertaining animations, this could have earned the worst grade so far.
Now,
Step into the ring to beat your opponents and chuck them over the top rope in Battle Royale. You're a member of the Battle Royale of America Wrestling League, and you want to be the best of the best. Face off against 1 to 4 opponents and attack them without mercy. Can you defeat them all? There are 5 wrestlers to choose from. Mongo Khan, Sumo Master, Meat Eater, the Executioner, and Spitfire Spike. You can get a facsimile of a promo out of them before choosing your game mode from an exhibition or a tournament. After selecting the number of players, of which there can be 5 humans, you go to the locker room, where up to 5 managers compete in a race to choose their client for the night. Once the bell rings, it's an all-out brawl among combatants. You throw strikes by pressing combinations of buttons 1, 2, and select. These vary among high, middle, or low strikes, but I couldn't tell if they really had any different power, though some felt like they had different reach. All wrestlers play the same, but their strikes are different. Meat Eater's ankle-biting attack was probably the dumbest. After enough attacks, your life is low enough, and the computer will pick you up by pressing button 1, 2, and up at the same time, then walking to the ropes and dumping you out. Escape is possible, but not likely against the relentless computer. You can also be struck out of the ring if you're unlucky enough to be in position. After the match, you get your score in cash along with some match stats. The tournament mode puts you in a series of 15 matches against 1, 2, 3, or all 4 opponents, with you as their only target. You can refresh your health a few times each match by pressing up and select. This won't save you though, and at best will elongate the match for another 30 seconds or so. When it comes to grading Battle Royale on TurboGrafx 16, graphics get a 2.0. The sprites are interesting at best. The manager portraits are kinda nice. Sound gets a 1.5. The sound effects, voice samples, and music are all of below average quality. Gameplay gets a 0.5. Here's the rub. The controls are terrible, and the super short match length makes one mistake feel too punishing. Difficulty gets a 0.5. You are ganged up on by multiple opponents in tournament mode. Fun factor gets a 0.5. It's entertaining for the first half of one match, then the frustration sets in. Overall, Battle Royale earns a 1.0 and gets a D. This is one game that I won't be looking for a rematch with. Stay away. Complete circuits with random pieces to score points in loops. Here's a puzzle game similar but different to Pipe Dream. Try to rack up the most points as you can by creating large loops. You begin by choosing one of three game types. Games A and B have you placing pieces of pipe on a 7x18 grid. The pieces you get are random, but can be of many different shapes. You can rotate them with a press of the A button. The longer the circuit, the more points you score. Do you want to set yourself up for big loops, or do you want more smaller tracks? Pieces start out with simple elbows and straight lines, but progress to Z pieces and U pieces. You have a limited amount of time to place your piece, with higher levels granting you less time. You have 2 extra chances that are lost if you don't make your time limit. Occasionally, you're given a piece that will complete any loop that you haven't connected. You don't get to see what piece you'll get next, so planning ahead is pretty much impossible. Learning the possible pieces can help, but it's a real crapshoot. The Type C game shows you a completed loop and then removes random pieces. It's up to you to recreate the loop with the pieces you were given. I hope you have a good memory. I sure don't. When it comes to grading loops on NES, graphics get a 1.0. Very boring. Not much is going on, but it doesn't hinder play. Sound gets a 1.5. The music ranges from decent to not so great. Sound effects are pretty shrill. Gameplay gets a 1.5. Take random pieces and complete loops. Not difficult in theory. Difficulty gets a 1.5. In practice, not being able to see your next piece is pretty unforgivable. Fun factor gets a 0.5. I really didn't enjoy myself. This isn't my kind of puzzle game. Overall, Loops earns a 1.2 and gets a D+. This isn't something that I can recommend. It's just not any fun. Show how your Kung Fu is better than all other Kung Fu in Tiger Road. You are Li Wong, master of the O-Lin boxing technique. During your travels, the master of Dragon God boxing came through town and abducted all the children. The first rescue attempt failed miserably, but now that you're back, you're the only one who can save the day. This action platformer has you running to the right and jumping with button 1. Instead of punching things, as a master of a punching martial art, you have one of 3 weapons. The sickle, which looks more like an axe, attacks in an arc. The sword stabs forward and is quick to attack with. The Morning Star is a slightly longer range weapon, but isn't as fast. I didn't have a favorite weapon, with each being less than friendly to wield, but I did earn the ability to throw tiger spirits at high health. Up to 3 enemies can be on a screen at once. They spawn each time you trip their pixel. You have to take them out or they will attack without remorse. Enemy placements are just rude, forcing you to stop where those trip lines are. These knights are just straight up jerks, some dying and others regenerating immediately. Swordsmen outreach me as they jump on screen and are therefore annoying. Occasionally enemies will drop items. Some give you points while others can help by restoring health. Don't get the yellow potion. It steals your life. Just jump over these bad boys. Stages have a bit of variety to them. There are straightforward levels. There are mazes where you need to jump platforms. There are flying stages where you have to avoid obstacles. There are bonus rounds that require you to mash the button to chop the candle down or beat off 50 monks without getting hit. There are bosses too. The boss of stage 2, it's hard. I couldn't figure out the boss of level 3 and gave up after a while. When it comes to grading Tiger Road on TurboGrafx 16, graphics get a 1.5. Graphics are average at best. Sprites aren't very crisp or animated very fluidly. Sound gets a 1.0. The music and sound effects aren't pleasing. Gameplay gets a 1.5. The design of levels and enemies aren't balanced while making the gameplay unsatisfying. Difficulty gets a 1.0. Only 3 continues and enemies want to swarm you constantly. Fun factor gets a 1.0. I didn't enjoy my time on Tiger Road very much at all. Overall, Tiger Road earns 1.2 and gets a D+. This adventure wasn't a very fun time, and I don't recommend it. The fate of the entire universe is in your hands in Orb 3D. Apparently, an evil space wizard, Crone, is using a black hole to swallow up whole solar systems. Your Millennium Orb is the only spacecraft able to withstand the energy forces of the black hole. It's up to you to find your way through 30 of his Enigma chambers, solving puzzles to save the universe. You directly control 2 force field paddles on either side of the stage. You need to bounce the ship back and forth and through obstacles on the board. The ship bounces to the foreground and background as it hits the paddles. You can manually have it switch by pressing the A button, but it will also turn back to the previous paddle, so make sure you're in position. You will have to bounce it near the edges of the paddle to get diagonal movement to hit those hard-to-reach obstacles. Each level has a gimmick of some sort, and they all require precision timing with changing Z-planes. Ones that stick in my head are bowling pins that knock down everything behind where you collide, a slide puzzle that isn't too difficult if you don't hit the wrong ones. I had to beat the game at tic-tac-toe. I also needed to get a bingo. There were plenty of other levels that I had no idea what I was supposed to do, so I just tried hitting everything. Sometimes you can get an extra ship if you hit the right enemy. You also have a fuel gauge that counts down and takes huge dips if your ship misses the paddle. You can refuel by pressing the B button. This sends you to Vern's Orborama to get some gas. In order to fill up, you have to be precise in moving through small holes. When it comes to grading Orb 3D on NES, graphics get a 1.0. I give it credit for sprite scaling on the ship. That's all. Sound gets a 1.0. The looping song isn't enjoyable, and the sound effects are plain. Gameplay gets a 1.5. Getting the angle of the ship right to go where you want was not intuitive. Difficulty gets a 2.0. Some puzzles are easy to understand, others are not so much. Fun factor gets a 1.0. Very quirky, but not very fun. Overall, Orb 3D earns 1.3 and gets a D+. If you really want a puzzle game that is kind of Pong-ish, give it a try. But don't expect a masterpiece. This is akin to Crohn's disease. Hop in a stock car and try to finish first in front of all of your rivals in Days of Thunder. I realized I had never seen the movie, so popped it on while I played this game. It was alright. You are in the shoes of Cole Trickle, no relation to Dick Trickle, who was NASCAR Rookie of the Year a year prior at the young babyface age of 48. You're a hotshot young driver who knows nothing about cars but can drive with the best of them. There are 8 races in the season. Do you have what it takes to win the Series Cup? At its core, a racing game is about driving and beating the clock or your opponents. Days of Thunder is no different in that regard. However, it is different in how you control your vehicle. The A button is your accelerator, but you don't hold it down to go. instead pressing it until it gets to the speed you want. Of course, full speed around a corner is going to land you a spot in the wall, so you need to press the B button to brake. Being precise with your speed and positioning are of the utmost importance. As you make your turns, your tires begin to wear down. The more worn, the slower you have to come into those corners to avoid the wall. If you hit the wall, you may wear your tires out more quickly, damage your engine at its top speed, or crack your fuel tank. Your gas also depletes as you drive around, more quickly with a cracked tank. To remedy this, you need to make pit stops. The pits are near the starting line and require you to slow way down and turn into them. If you're going too fast, you'll speed right through pit road and lose some position. If you're slow enough, you take control of your pit crew. Pressing the B button cycles through the 5 different crew members. On top is your engine repairman who can fix engine damage when the right side of the car is jacked up. On the bottom is your fuel man who can top off the tank when the car is flat on the ground. The 3 middle guys will jack up the car and change the tires. I appreciate that the developers wanted to make the pits be an active part of gameplay, but only controlling one person at a time takes away from the reality that pit crews need to move with speed and synchronicity. I instead found myself dropping places like it was my job. Catching up and passing the racers in front of you is very difficult. The scale of the courses are off, being much shorter and faster than reality. Straightaways are not long at all, quickly dumping you into the corners. This would be fine if you could actually outspeed your opponents. Don't get me started on your rivals Rowdy and Russ. They are constantly at the front and will actively try to cut you off. Winning a race is difficult, let alone scoring the most points over all 8. If you do particularly badly in the races, you'll be forced to run a time trial to keep your spot. Miss your goal, and it's game over. When it comes to grading Days of Thunder on NES, graphics get a 1.5. Cars are plain, tracks are plain, backgrounds are plain. Pit road is slightly more detailed, but not special. Sound gets a 1.0. Engine noises aren't pleasant, and the menu music isn't anything special. Gameplay gets a 1.5. There's very little nuance to the racing. Get your speed right and don't hit anything. The pits are a missed swing. Difficulty gets a 1.0. The races aren't fair at all. There's not enough room to pass opponents, and they can get perfectly in your way to keep you from slingshotting around them. Fun factor gets a 1.5. It's nice when you get into a groove, but one tiny discrepancy in the timing of your button presses will screw it all up. Overall, Days of Thunder earns a 1.3 and gets a D+. The base for a decent NASCAR experience is there, but it's not fleshed out in any way. I can't recommend it for anything other than a curiosity. You're the last hope to save the colony, an atomic robo-kid. A blast of intense radiation befell Terra 12 several years ago. This has left the colony in shambles with radiation poisoning, mutations, and sterility, bringing the population to its knees. But there's still hope if you can find Eve, a biodroid filled with fresh human DNA. To free her, the last hope is the ultimate android, Atomic Robo-Kid. 19 levels separate you from saving the human race, if you have what it takes. This scrolling shoot-'em-up is an arcade port that works off of 2 buttons. Button A fires whatever weapon you have equipped, while button B switches weapons with a press, or keeps you facing a direction when you move the opposite direction with a hold. Fly enemies drop crystals that you use to power up. These can be shot to change them among the available choices. The fission gun is a powerful blaster that makes mincemeat of enemies. The missiles are useful for blocking enemy projectiles in their blast radius. The 3-way pistol is best on levels with narrow corridors that move up and down as well as forward. The 5-way gun blasts a wide spread in front of you. There are also yellow utility crystals that are collected to produce a shield. Once you collect 4, you can take a shot that would normally kill you and be fine. There is a speed increasing item as well as a limited time rapid fire upgrade. There's apparently a dragon guy that is a merchant you can buy stuff from, but I guess I killed him every time I saw him. Whoops. Running into enemies won't harm you, but their projectiles sure will. Bosses are blasted to bits quickly and easily with the fission shot. Duels with other governors are a crapshoot. Trying to abuse their AI is probably your best bet. Some levels have 2 exits for you to choose from, changing the next level you head to. They all lead to the final boss, which requires some smart movements, but it's really not that difficult to defeat. Then rejoice as you give birth to a new world. When it comes to grading Atomic Robo Kid on Sega Genesis, graphics get a 2.5. The graphics are pleasant enough with decent detail and a lot of colors. Sound gets a 1.0. Ooh, is that some badly instrumented music? The compositions might sound good with a different sound engine, but this one is too pitchy and relies heavily on sharps and flats that aren't pleasant. Gameplay gets a 1.5. There are multiple weapons that come in handy in different situations. Enemies reappear if you leave the screen and come back, which creates problems. Difficulty gets a 1.5. Levels are short and straightforward, but many levels are the kind that if you die, you're screwed because you lose your power-ups. Fun factor gets a 1.0. It's enjoyable for a short amount of time, then when it doesn't progress, it loses its charm. Overall, Atomic Robo Kid gets a 1.5 and gets a C-. It's not as good as some of the other shoot-'em-ups I've played this month, and that makes it a bit disappointing, even if it isn't terrible. Learn why the glove is so bad in Super Glove Ball. You're trapped in a space station intent on killing you. It's up to you to find your way through this 3-dimensional Arkanoid by clearing walls and searching for the exit. Do you have what it takes to find your way to freedom? I remember getting Super Glove Ball with my Power Glove when I was a kid. I thought how fun it was going to be actually punching my opponents in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Of course, anyone who actually used the Power Glove knows that it was a pile of hot garbage in practice. But at least it looked super cool. The first thing you have to learn is how to navigate the 3 dimensions. The D-pad takes care of the X and Y axes. To go forward and back on the Z axis, you hold and release the A button. You release a ball into the room by pressing the B button. You have to use the glove like a paddle and ricochet it into squares on the wall to make them disappear. You can also grab and release the ball with the B button. Once all the squares on a wall have been hit, you may be able to move into an adjacent room, if it exists, by moving against it and pressing the select button. The glove has a health bar that depletes as you hit enemies. It replenishes as you move to a new room. You begin with several balls and several lives. Losing all of your balls will take away 1 life. You can shoot fireballs out of the fingertip by pressing the select button. This is an easy way to take enemies out in the level, but there's a limited supply of bullets. Your ammo is replenished frequently when hitting question mark blocks. In fact, there are a lot of different power-ups that you come across. 1 ball is split into 3 with the tri-ball. Super speeds the ball up and automatically bounces it around the room without your help. Row clears an entire row or column of squares when it hits. The manual says ice slows the movement of enemies, but I didn't see any difference. Bomb exists and is probably a more powerful hit. I like when Super combines with Tri-Ball to quickly clear a stage. I wish that Super could be paired with Row, but alas, Rare did not want to give me that superpower. The puzzle room offended me by making it so difficult to aim for the squares I wanted. Why can't I grab the ball in this room? Trying to aim by just tapping the ball with the gloves is an exercise in frustration. You may think they're going to be something special to help you. The holes are a death trap. There are occasional warps if you hit a specific square. I got warped back a couple times, but when I got warped back to level 1 twice in a row, I rage quit and vowed not to play this game ever again. When it comes to grading Super Glove Ball on NES, graphics gets a 1.0. Everything looks poor overall, and all the sprite flickering doesn't help in the least. Sound gets a 2.5. Rare is good at making interesting music and sounds. Different instruments are very neat, but the ball bouncing sound is atrocious. Gameplay gets 2.0. The controls work, even with the Power Glove, but it doesn't make them very good. Difficulty gets a 1.5. You get a lot of balls and lives, but I feel like there's a lot of chance at play. Unless you are cool with playing each room over and over and over again. Fun factor gets a 1.0. There's not enough depth for this game to be enjoyable. Overall, Super Glove Ball earns a 1.6 and gets a C-. It's alright for a tech demo, but it's not a great game by any means. Viruses, germs, and disease are out to get you and Dr. Mario. Match 4 gameplay comes to the Nintendo Entertainment System by way of giving Mario yet another profession. This time it's up to everyone's favorite plumber to don the lab coat and become, of all things, a pill pusher. 20 levels of difficulty stand between you and, I don't know, fame? Fortune? Victory. Dr. Mario throws multicolored pills into a jar and you have to maneuver them in a way to destroy the viruses inside. The pills, they're vitamins, come in some combination of 3 colors: blue, yellow, and red. They can be rotated to place horizontally or vertically, but the pill remains attached to itself. To destroy the viruses, there have to be 4 like colors sequentially in a row. This can be any combination of virus or vitamin. If half a pill is obliterated, the other half will fall to the depth below. The A and B buttons rotate the vitamins in opposite directions. The goal is to maneuver the pill into the proper place you want. This doesn't seem difficult, but when you're not sure what side of the capsule will be rotated, you can get yourself into a heap of trouble. The first levels have few viruses and are a cinch to complete. Each level increases the number of germs to destroy by 4. This gets pretty unruly as you get into the teens. I found myself trying to thread pills in between viruses to kill them more efficiently. What would end up happening is I would bury a virus in a sea of multicolored vitamins, making getting to it difficult. By this point, it may be best not to be fancy, but win by any means necessary. You only get points by killing viruses anyway. There is a 2-player mode where as you clear viruses, you drop vitamin pieces in the other player's jar. But I had no one to play with, so don't expect any footage. When it comes to grading Dr. Mario on NES, graphics get a 1.5. Nothing particularly fun to look at, but at least it isn't awful. Sound gets a 1.5. I can only hear the Brental Floss rendition of Fever. It's non-stop. Please, help me. Gameplay gets 2.0. 3 colors, lots of viruses as the levels move on. I've never been able to get the rotation down correctly. Difficulty gets a 2.0. The game becomes exponentially harder when you pass level 10. This is fine if Dr. Mario is your puzzle game of choice. Fun factor gets a 1.0. It's never been my puzzle game of choice. Give me Tetris or Columns any day. Overall, Dr. Mario earns a 1.6 and gets a C-. I don't really care for the NES version of Dr. Mario, and think it's one of the lousier titles Nintendo developed. take to the skies on the back of a winged horse during Grecian ancient times in Philios. Apollo and Artemis are separated, and the goddess of the moon is abducted by Typhon. The king of the beasts wants Artemis for his own, but Apollo isn't having it for 1 second. He hops on the back of Pegasus and sets off for 7 stages of action. This is a very simple vertical scrolling shoot 'em up. Buttons A, B, and C all shoot your beam forward. A tap of the button allows you to shoot rapidly, while holding the button charges a stronger shot. Over the course of your journey, you'll get a handle on which enemies need a tap and which need a blast. Golden eagles can be shot to release a power-up. Most of them will be speed-ups, which stack a few times. You'll also frequently see options of which you can have 2. These shadow your movement and give you that little extra bit of firepower. Even more rarely, you'll find a life piece or special weapon. The homing shot and a cross shot are helpful, but I'm not certain if they last for a specific amount of time until you get hit or both. In the final level, you collect letters to spell Philios, and then can shoot massive waves from the shattered sword. You don't die from taking 1 point of damage, but instead have a life meter with 4 hit points to start. This gives you a little leeway, but you can't play recklessly, or you'll be dead faster than you can say ambrosia. There's a portion where other winged riders come up from behind you, and you have to run them into the stage walls, which was interesting, but quite difficult. Reaching the end of the level puts you into the boss's lair. This is a welcome checkpoint, and usually comes with a couple speed and option boosts. Learning the pattern of the boss can take a few tries, but you'll feel good when you do. After beating the boss, you see Artemis tied up, and she yearns for your help. You can gain extra lives through points, but you are limited to 3 continues, unless you enter a code. When it comes to grading Philios on Sega Genesis, graphics get a 2.0. I'm not impressed by the graphics. Sprites are small and not very detailed. Sound gets a 1.5. The music is pretty subpar. I didn't like it very much at all. Gameplay gets 2.0. Shoot and avoid. You don't get very many power-ups, which is not very satisfying. Difficulty gets a 1.5. Enemies move too fast for me. You'll need to try a few times to get through it. Fun factor gets a 1.5. It was run-of-the-mill. It didn't really grab me to a point where I'd like to play it again. Overall, Philios earns a 1.7 and gets a C-. This is a subpar game in my opinion. Not bad or unplayable, but not really that good. It feels like it was slapped together real quick to port something from the arcade. Dr. Bomb is looking to take over the world, and it's up to you to save it in Bravo Man. The ordinary Arnold has been transformed into the titular superhero by an alien. There are 22 stages for you to go through in order to come out victorious. Do you have what it takes to persevere? Bravo Man runs to the right and jumps with button 1. An extra high jump can be had if you attack while on the rise. You can throw a Bravo Punch and a few other attacks with button 2. The length of your punch varies based on how long you hold the attack button down. Enemies must be attacked to be killed, but you will only ever hit the first enemy or obstacle you come in contact with. Look, it's Tanuki Mario. Some enemies will drop a luck symbol. Collecting enough of these will give you a ticket, and Lottery Man will come on screen to give you an item. At the end of the stage, you get an onigiri for every ticket you have. Dr. Bomb taunts you between levels, getting more and more irritated at your progress. Some levels put you underwater. You can shoot missiles with button 2 and drop depth charges with button 1. These stages are auto-scrolling, so you have to be aware of the stage surroundings as well as enemies. Items are much less prevalent, and it's difficult to avoid some baddies, so these stages are slightly more difficult. At the end of the level, you fight a boss. These guys are all hit sponges, but if you learn their patterns, you can avoid taking much damage. Some of them come back in later levels to try and settle the score, especially the doppelganger of Bravo Man. These versions may move more quickly or shoot more projectiles, but they tend to attack in the same way. Dr. Bomb is the final boss and is surprisingly quite easy, even if he has an admiration for Hitler. When it comes to grading Bravo Man on TurboGrafx 16, graphics get a 2.0. It's colorful and the sprites are big, but I can't say I like the looks too much. The sound gets a 1.5. The music isn't very memorable, and the constant voice sample of Bravo being said every time you punch got on my nerves fast. Gameplay gets a 1.5. The controls are quite clunky and lead to mistakes a lot. Difficulty gets a 2.5. Levels are short and you're given a lot of health power-ups, even if you only have a few lives. Fun factor gets 2.0. I had an average amount of fun, but would have liked longer levels and less of them. Overall, Bravo Man earns a 1.9 and gets a C. This is a very average game. A little too long to not have a level select. Show why no one can defeat a biplane in Fire Shark. Enemies amass in the South Pacific, but without an attack, they are allowed to continue. Suddenly they attack from everywhere and destroy everyone in their path. A single phantom aviator appears on the horizon in a biplane with a fire shark painted on it. The ace is a time traveler who will take on anyone, anywhere, anytime. 10 levels stand between you and immortality. This vertical scrolling shoot 'em up has you firing your weapons with the A or C buttons. There are 3 different weapons that you can grab over the course of your adventure that can be powered up every 3 P icons you collect. The blue weapon is the wide shot. You start with only a few bullets, but as you collect power-ups, you can have up to 16 bullets that are a bit weak. The green icon is the shark beam. It's a spiraling green laser that grows in power and spread as it powers up. The red icon is the super fire that is a constant beam. The more power-ups, the more beams that attack in multiple directions. There are plenty of enemies that come at you from all directions. You need to take them out before they can run into or shoot you. There are a lot of destructible enemies and stationary turrets that hide bonus items. It becomes a game of avoid the projectiles and avoid the weapon power-ups you don't want. Unfortunately, the levels don't really give you a whole lot of variety. Bosses at the end of the level are your typical bullet sponges and won't give you too hard of a time if you can avoid their shots. I found them to be a good time to drop a bomb with the B button. These do massive amounts of damage and are a very helpful tool. Between levels you land and earn points for each bomb you have left and lightning bolt you've collected. When you finish all 10 levels, you get to start all over again. When it comes to grading Fire Shark on Sega Genesis, graphics get a 2.5. Everything looks pretty fluid, but it's mostly boring, except for little dudes running around at the end of the levels. Sound gets a 2.5. The music and effects are very Genesis. Nothing that sticks with you though. Gameplay gets a 2.0. There's not a ton of depth to the gameplay. You only get a few different weapons, and deaths steal your power-ups. Difficulty gets a 1.5. Levels start to feel a little cheap as you get farther along. Fun factor gets a 1.5. I thought this was on the boring end of a genre I usually get a kick out of. Overall, Fire Shark earns a 2.0 and gets a C. I was actually kind of disappointed with this title. It seems too bare boned for what it could have been. Take to the world of mechanical insects in Insector X. 2 tribes of micromen, the Belzers and the Insectors, are at war. You are Kate, and have escaped to the desert where you fell under the protection of a young boy. But now, after wiping out your brethren, the Belzers are on your tail. It's time to put up or shut up, as Kate decides to take it to his tormentors. This is standard side-scrolling shooter fare. The screen moves slowly to the right and enemies come on screen at you. Button B is the default normal weapon button and can be held down for rapid fire. This is useful as you can destroy enemies right as they come on screen if your aim is true. The downside is that the most prevalent enemy, the wellfly, will sometimes shoot a projectile upon death. This makes it really difficult to find a safe spot if you aren't perfect at your positioning. Killing certain enemies drops an orb. S increases your speed. P is a power-up for your normal gun, increasing its strength and spread. The special weapon powers up your button C attack. There are 4 levels of anti-air and anti-ground weapons, each becoming more powerful. The lightning crash damages all enemies on screen. You can cycle among these 3 weapons with a press of button A. The levels are pretty short, but require some memorization to get through. The bosses are pretty easy, with the manual giving you safe zones for the first 2. Finding their weak point is your first task. They are bullet sponges and require dozens of hits while you avoid their predictable attacks. The beginning of the final level tested my patience to the extreme. Though the environment wasn't much trouble up until this point, I found myself getting caught in pillars of honeycomb and dying dozens of times. Death typically zaps you back to your default powers, but the question mark allows you to keep all of your power-ups if you die. I resorted to save states to get through this one. With only 3 continues, I would have had to restart from the beginning several times to finish. When it comes to grading in Sector X on Sega Genesis, graphics get a 3.0. It looks as good as I expect, with enemies having nice detail and the backgrounds being alright. Sound gets a 1.5. The shooting sound effect overpowers the decent Genesis music. Those bombs sound like an old dot matrix printer. Gameplay gets 2.5. Typical side-scrolling shooter action. Kill what you can, avoid the rest. Difficulty gets a 1.5. I'm going to classify this as a bullet hell in certain areas. Though levels are short, one-hit deaths are a severe punishment. Fun factor gets 2.0. You need to be fully powered up to really get enjoyment. But then a death will really bum you out. Overall, in Sector X, earns a 2.1 and gets a C. Levels are too twitchy, unforgiving, and short for my taste. It doesn't hit the sweet spot that I like, but it isn't bad. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Kids are dying in their sleep, and no one has a reason except for natural causes. But that's not what's really happening. Freddy Krueger is back to terrorizing the neighborhood and must be stopped at all cost. Go through 7 levels picking up all of Freddy's bones so you can dump them in the incinerator and destroy his presence for good. You take control of a teenager and can be joined up by up to 3 others for simultaneous play. I watched James and Mike Mondays to get an idea of what 4 players look like. It looks like a fight among friends waiting to happen. You start on the street in front of a house that is inaccessible despite how long you press up. As you run along to the next house, there are enemies in your path. You could punch them with the B button or jump over them with the A button. You're honestly better off jumping over them most of the time. Once you find a house, you have to remember to hold up long enough to run in. This is where you need to do a bunch of platforming. Scattered about the level are a number of Freddy's bones. You need to collect them all to move forward to the next part of the level. Other than bones, you can find a cup of coffee to refill your sleep meter. There are also 3 other icons showing a runner, yin-yang, and mage hat that you want to collect. The platforming is a bit of a chore in the real world, but if you let your sleep meter tick all the way down, you head into the dream world where Freddy is lurking. You can switch among 4 different personas in the dream world. Besides your normal self, you can become an acrobat, ninja, or necromancer. The acrobat allows you to jump high, run fast, and throw a javelin. The ninja becomes your MVP despite the shuriken having a short range, because when you jump, you throw a flying kick. The necromancer launches fire magic across the screen and can hover a bit when jumping. The hover is important in later levels. If you spend too long in the dream world, the music changes to the Freddy rhyme, and at the end you must battle him one-on-one. Beating him allows you to wake up and continue your quest. The end of each level has a piece of Freddy as the boss. There isn't really much variety to the bosses. The first two are on a chain and you have to avoid his attacks and respond with your own. The others bounce around the screen in a set pattern and can drop enemies. Trying to fight the boss in the real world is challenge mode. You're much better off going to the dream world and gaining powers. The final challenge is a boss gauntlet before you take Freddy on like you do when you spend too long in the dream world. When it comes to grading A Nightmare on Elm Street on NES, graphics get a 2.5. I think it looks pretty good overall. The bones sometimes blend in with the backgrounds. Sound gets a 2.5. Music is good enough, especially the Freddy rhyme, and sound effects aren't terrible. Gameplay gets a 2.0. The character is really floaty and weak in the real world, but is much more fun to play with in the dream world. Difficulty gets a 2.0. The levels aren't that difficult. You get a generous number of lives and continues. Attrition can get you though. Fun factor gets 2.0. I didn't hate my experience of fighting Freddy. Overall, A Nightmare on Elm Street earns a 2.2 and gets a C+. For an LJN game, it's not that bad. I'm not saying it's good, but it's quite playable. Push, pull, and kick colored orbs to their destinations in Chu Man Fu. The antagonist is the titular Chu Man Fu, and he has taken away the two favorite foods of the people, fried rice and egg rolls. It's up to the twins, Lala and Ling Ling, to put the smackdown on Chu and his legion of baddies. There are 5 areas of 10 rounds, 5 bonus stages, and 10 games for a total of 550 levels. Do you have what it takes to get through them all? This game can be played with 1 or 2 players. Each level tasks you with moving 4 balls onto their same colored platform. You can grab them with button 2 and push or pull them straight and around corners. There are 4 enemies on stage and they can't walk through the balls, but they can get you if you're in their path. Sometimes they injure you, but other times when they touch you, you're dead. It's cool that you can move around corners, but sometimes you need to kick an orb through a wall. You can achieve this by pressing button 1 next to a ball. Each has a different destructive power, with black orbs breaking walls rather quickly, while the blue balls take a long time to break a wall down. There are items on some stages, with the most important being the hidden scroll that shows the orb paths. Enemies have different abilities through the stages. In the ice levels, the giant Yeti can freeze orbs so you can't move them. Big monkey men can lift orbs and require you to attack them to force a drop. The Kappas climb on an orb, keeping you from a ball. Frogs will blow fire at you, and more. You can kill enemies by kicking orbs at them, but this will take away from the number of diamonds you earn at the end of the stage. You're given the opportunity to turn your diamonds in for extra lives. There's an edit mode that I couldn't particularly figure out. Not as good an editor as Boxy Boy. There's also a 2-player only kickball mode that is there to help you learn the controls. I didn't get much use out of these modes. I made it 35 stages before I got bored and gave it up. When it comes to grading Chu Man Fu on TurboGrafx 16, graphics get a 2.0. Sprites are unique, but backgrounds aren't very good. Sound gets a 2.0. The music is stereotypical Chinese. It isn't my cup of tea. Gameplay gets a 2.5. It's nice to be able to both push and pull the orbs instead of just pushing them. Difficulty gets 3.0. You have a certain amount of lives, but if you die, you have infinite continues to come back and try again. Sans diamonds. Fun factor gets a 2.0. I enjoyed myself enough, but it didn't keep me gripped to play through all 55 stages, let alone 10 times through. Overall, Chu Man Fu earns a 2.3 and gets a C+. This is a play a few stages and come back later for a few more kind of game. Totally playable, but not my favorite. More aliens are attacking Earth in Whip Rush. Mankind has done what mankind does and has drained the entire solar system of resources. What to do? What to do? How about send some spaceships to the nearest star system and have them set up shop so we pillage those planets too? Unfortunately, contact was lost, leading us to give up on the colonizers. Until one day, a fleet of aliens appeared, hell-bent on taking the Earth for their benefit. All that's left has been dumped into the creation of an unstoppable jet fighter, the Whip Rush. The Whip Rush has customizable controls, but at default, the B button shoots your currently equipped weapon to the right of the ship. While most levels scroll to the right, sections within may move in any direction, taking away your ability to hit enemies. In an attempt to give you an advantage, the speed of your ship can be altered with the A button. There are 8 settings, but I didn't find much use outside of the faster speeds. There are some item pods and the occasional enemy that can be destroyed to reveal power-ups. They alternate among laser, missile, fireball, and power claw. You can collect 2 power claws, and they are rotated around your ship with a press of the C button. If you press the C button while firing, you launch your power claws out in the direction they're facing, causing damage to enemies they touch. I pretty much held B and C down the whole time. The other 3 power-ups upgrade the weapons you and the power claws are equipped with. The laser shoots forward and is kind of weak, but shoots really rapidly, which can make up for it. The more L icons you collect, the more lasers you shoot. The missiles shoot forward, more powerful versions also shoot backward, and the power claws even home in on enemies a bit. My least favorite weapon is the fireball, which shoots in the opposite direction you're moving. I never understand why this weapon is offered in shoot-em-ups. I feel like I'm always moving to the plane of the enemy, not running away from them. Levels can get pretty frantic with lots of enemies that take many hits to destroy. Getting hit when you have a weapon upgrade leaves you alive, but with the default weapon. Get hit with the default weapon equipped, and you're dead. A new ship flies on screen, but without any power claws. While item pods aren't too prevalent, there does seem to be enough to not kill you because of no power-ups. Bosses can all be killed by shooting to the right, but may take a lot longer than if you were fully upgraded. Not all bosses give feedback that you're hurting them, but if you keep firing away, you should go down, and you can be the hero of the solar system. When it comes to grading Whip Rush on Sega Genesis, graphics get a 2.5. Backgrounds are cool, sprites are fairly small and simple. There is slowdown if too many enemies and projectiles are on screen at once. Sound gets a 1.5. Music is average at best, but the shooting sound effects are annoying. Gameplay gets 2.5. Rotating the options and launching them to kill enemies works as intended. Difficulty gets a 2.5. Lots of lives earned through points, and 5 continues are enough to get good. Fun factor gets a 2.5. There are some frustrating bits, but everything seems to have a solution, which I appreciate. Overall, Whip Rush earns a 2.3 and gets a C+. Another run-of-the-mill shoot-em-up. It has its strengths and weaknesses, but you can gain some fun out of it. Head into the dreams of your friend to liberate her in Mendel Palace. Candy's dolls have all come to life and have trapped her in her dreams. She's been carried off to Mendel Palace, and it's up to you, her best friend Bon Bon, to defeat 8 dolls on their turf in order to save her. Before all is said and done, you'll have 100 levels to get past before you can claim victory. To begin, you choose one of 8 areas to attack. These are all controlled by a specific type of doll that is your enemy for 10 rounds. Each level has a field of play that is 7 squares by 5 squares. Each square is invisibly split into 9 smaller zones that you can walk on. Pressing the A or B button shuffles the square. Shuffling the square is your main way of attacking enemies and may unveil a special item panel. These item panels have several different things it can do, but will only activate if you walk over the center zone. Most prevalent are star panels. If you collect 100 of these, you earn an extra life and a speed increase. The last star panel on each stage begins to blink and is worth 10 stars, making them very attractive to collect. Moon panels turn every open square into stars. The roulette panel gives you points, or an elusive one up. The cross panels shuffle all squares vertically and horizontally from them. The sun panel shuffles every square on the board, which is super useful in wiping the board. Most of the time. The glowing panels are enemy panels, which spawn more dolls. If you complete a level and keep shuffling panels, you may accidentally unearth one of these and elongate the amount of time you have to spend. The clock and time panel attacks the direction that is colored in. There are panels that bounce you and allow you to slide and tackle enemies into oblivion. Metal block panels block you from moving forward, but can be destroyed by some enemies. And the lock panels stop you from shuffling them anymore. Some stages are built around the gimmick of one or more of these panels together. In order to pass a level, you need to destroy all of the dolls present. This is done by shuffling them back into a wall or metal block, or bouncing through them. You can also pass a level by finding a special bonus panel that takes you to a bunch of stars. Each doll has a different ability to make your job more difficult. This ranges from spinning around like a top, jumping to avoid being shuffled, drawing on the ground, effectively locking the panel, swimming through all open panels, imitating your movements and floor shuffling, and sumo stomping the ground, causing a row to shuffle. Some of these enemies become very difficult to handle because turning direction when you walk doesn't happen immediately. This causes many deaths. Luckily, continues are unlimited, so you can power your way through any level that you find too difficult. The end of each area has you face off against a boss. This is either a fight against 6 stronger versions of the level doll, or against the main kidnapper, who can turn you into the doll of the level. I found the latter to be much more interesting. Once you beat all 8 areas, you have access to Mendel Palace and 20 final levels of mind-bending action. But if you've made it this far, you can totally finish things off. When it comes to grading Mendel Palace on NES, graphics get a 1.5. It's more colorful than I would have expected, but the flickering of enemies is really obnoxious. Sound gets a 1.5. Music is passable, but nothing more than simple compositions. Sound effects aren't overpoweringly annoying. Gameplay gets a 3.0. The slight delay in turning is incredibly frustrating, but the general gameplay idea is pretty solid and complex. Difficulty gets a 3.0. You have unlimited continues, and most levels are fair, but others had me scratching my head and testing my patience. Fun factor gets a 3.0. This is a relatively enjoyable game that I sat down and played through to completion because I wasn't having a bad time. Overall, Mendel Palace earns a 2.4 and gets a C+. Satoshi Tajiri has stolen countless hours from me thanks to Pokemon, and 2 more on top of that because of Mendel Palace. Give it a shot. It's pretty good. Journey into the depths of your own mind in Psychosis. Every mind has an opening for evil, and the demon Ugar is looking for his chance to make you his. Escape the evil of your mind through 5 causes, or levels, in the most awesome ship your psyche could create. Don't give in to the demon, and fight with all you have. This is typical side-scrolling shoot-'em-up action. Your ship can shoot forward by pressing button 2, and you have to destroy things that come in your way, or avoid them long enough to get off screen. Certain enemies will drop orbs when they're destroyed. The S-orb will increase your speed, which is helpful for maneuvering. up until a point. The glowing orb adds a barrier that slowly wears down as you are attacked or run into enemies. Being a proper shoot 'em up, you can collect one of 3 other orbs that will give you a set of dual options called satellites. These orbit clockwise around your ship with a press of button 1. At their default, they can block enemy projectiles and cause damage to anything they touch. They're definitely your best friend, so getting comfortable with maneuvering them properly is your first priority. After collecting your satellites, they can be given power to attack with one of the other 3 orbs. The W orb is for wide beam. This shoots a slightly wider beam than the default weapon. The T orb gives you the thunder ability. Constant beams shoot in front and behind both satellites, causing continuous damage. B gives you the back laser. These shoot beams in the opposite direction, diagonally. Each weapon can be powered up multiple times, as long as you don't switch weapons in between. For example, an upgrade to the wide beam has each satellite shooting 3 wide beams. As you rotate the satellites, they will shoot in the direction they're facing. Each level will test your reflexes when it comes to dodging enemies, projectiles, and the scenery. There were a few times that I was busy watching my satellite and I blasted into a wall in front of me. It's occasionally difficult to tell what is a background tile and what is a barrier. Bosses aren't terribly difficult as long as you can keep control of your ship. I even found a spot on the final boss where he couldn't touch me, allowing for an easy win. When it comes to grading Psychosis on TurboGrafx 16, graphics get a 3.0. Graphics are colorful and varied. Each cause has its own style. Sound gets a 2.0. Music is average at best, and as is usually true in shoot 'em ups, the weapon noises can get annoying. Gameplay gets a 2.5. You don't have much control over the weapon power-ups you can get, but they all have their uses. Difficulty gets a 2.5. Sometimes the edges of the level look like backgrounds and will kill you. You can get a steady supply of extra lives, but until you memorize level layouts, 3 continues might not be enough. Fun factor gets a 2.5. I enjoyed myself for the hour it took me to play through, but I bailed when it sent me through for a second time. Overall, Psychosis earns a 2.5 and gets a B-. It's a perfectly fine shoot 'em up, but it's not an envelope pusher in any way. Terrorists are back once again, making a mess of things in Iswat, city under siege. In its never-ending fight against crime, the most skilled soldiers of Iswat are chosen to don the ice combat suits. You are one of these soldiers. Advancing from your job as beat cop to shut down crime. The Evil Eye terrorist group seeks to neutralize your suits and take over the world. But they won't succeed if you can make it through 8 levels with guns ablazing. You begin the game without one of those sweet combat suits and must blast away at the bad guys on the streets. By default, jump with button C. Higher if you hold up while jumping. Button B is your trigger. You'll get used to pulling it constantly. After the second level, you get access to the ice combat suit. You're granted extra life and the ability to collect extra weapons. You switch among them by pressing button A. They all have their usefulness, but be careful not to die with one equipped, or you'll lose it. The super shot is a more powerful version of the normal shot, and will rapid fire if you hold the trigger down. The rocket launcher shoots rockets forward and down, locking onto bad guys that get too close. The plasma caster can be fired rapidly with weak shots, but if you let it power up for a second, it shoots out a proper Hadouken, blasting through enemies. The fire is a one-shot item that clears the screen at the cost of your burner meter. Another power-up you get when you unlock the armor is the use of the jetpack. By holding button C, you can hover in the air. You can do this indefinitely, but if you start moving around, it costs your burner meter. This regenerates fairly slowly, but is invaluable, especially in level 5 where you have to properly manage your movements to get to the end. It took me most of my playthrough to be comfortable with navigating using the jetpack. Bosses at the end of each level are exactly what I expected. You take a shot at them once, and if you don't defeat them, you learn their pattern. The only time this wasn't true for me was the boss of level 3. It took me several lives to figure out how to hit him with the rocket launcher. You need to make smart use of the jetpack to defeat most of the bosses. The final boss comes at you with a nice combat suit of his own, and you have to do your best to take him out. Watch out for his fire. When it comes to grading eSWAT City Under Siege on Sega Genesis, graphics get a 3.0. I really like the sprite work. Everything is pretty clean and looks well animated. Sound gets a 2.5. The music sounds Genesis good. Sound effects aren't bad, though I can see some getting on your nerves. Gameplay gets a 2.5. The weapons all have their uses, but moving precisely with the jetpack feels a bit clunky. Difficulty gets a 3.0. The sewer level will test your patience, but otherwise I found the game pretty fair. Fun factor gets a 2.5. While this isn't my favorite game by any means, it was a decent time, and I certainly didn't hate it. Overall, eSWAT City Under Siege earns a 2.7 and gets a B-. This actually turned out better than I expected. Taking some time to marinate on how I felt was beneficial for the game. War is back once again, spread throughout half the galaxy in Thunder Force 3. Man, looking at my list, Thunder Force 2 was my 300th game, while the sequel, released 13 months later, is my 610th. The Galaxy Union is still at war with the Empire of Lone. I thought we destroyed their mothership at the end of the previous game. I guess not. But this time we're taking the fight to them on 5 planets where a bunch of pieces of a cloaking device must be destroyed to unveil their base. Hop into the Starfighter Sticks and finish them off once and for all. Gone are the top-down sections from the last war. Now it's all side-scrolling. You can begin by choosing one of the 5 planets to begin on. There's probably a best planet to start with based on the power-ups you can gain. I died a lot as I learned the enemy patterns, but did end up choosing Hydra as my first mission. This jungle planet gives you rotating options almost immediately. These bad boys fire extra projectiles and can shield you from enemy shots. There are spots where you really need to lean on the missiles that shoot to the top and bottom of the screen and crawl forward. The planet Gorgon is a fire planet that requires you to avoid pillars of solid flame or quickly perish. The twin shot and the back shot are back, and you can switch among all your weapons with button B. Those are upgraded by the Sever Laser Beam and Lancer, respectively. The water planet Siren gives you your first taste of the Hunter homing shot. This is your MVP weapon for the rest of the game. There's also Wave Gun that can be helpful if you don't want to risk your Hunter. The rub on your weapons is that if you die with one equipped, you'll lose it. If you find yourself in a difficult looking area, it may be best to stick to the twin or back shot until you're safely out. The planet Hades features moving floors and ceilings that you are unable to escape. You have to know when and where it's going to move or you'll be trapped and quickly dead, though the shield can be helpful in giving you an extra chance. The ice planet Ellis is full of enemies and moves you in directions other than right. If you can maneuver deftly and avoid the icicles, you'll succeed. The last levels put you against the mothership of the Lone Fleet, and then their base of operations. It's like moving through the Death Star and requires your very best reaction time. The end of each level has a boss that all move and fire in set patterns. Once you get those down and figure out the best weapon to use, it's pretty easy. Take out the final boss and you get congratulated for your efforts. When it comes to grading Thunder Force 3 on Sega Genesis, graphics get a 3.0. Sprites and backgrounds look good, and I really like the level of detail present. Sound gets a 3.0. The music is very good. but the sound effects of the weapons are not so great and overpower everything else. Gameplay gets a 3.0. The different weapons are all useful at different times, and the levels play well. Difficulty gets a 2.0. Like usual, memorization is the key. I don't like difficulty based around memorization. Fun factor gets 2.5. It's an enjoyable time outside of BS deaths while you learn the level. Overall, Thunder Force 3 earns a 2.7 and gets a B-. This is a solid game. Much better than the previous title in the series. I recommend you play it. Show that you're the best Neanderthal of them all in caveman games. There are 6 events to master to become the greatest athlete of them all. Choose from one of 6 competitors, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Do you have what it takes to beat all the rest? Ready, set, go! You can choose to practice individual events or compete in them all. Each caveman, or woman, has a bit of a blurb about where they come from and what they're good at. Gronk is the best overall competitor without any weaknesses. Vincent is the worst overall competitor, just competing for the affections of Crudla. I started by taking Uga out for a spin because he looks like he could be a distant ancestor. The events start with clubbing. Humorously enough, it does begin with some erratic dancing in the intimidation phase, where you move the D-pad around quickly to push your opponent back. Then it's up to you to drain the other guy's health by smashing them. The overhead smash is powerful, but takes a long time to wind up. It's easily countered with a quick shot to the face or knee, and can be set up by holding the A button to point in the opposite direction. The mate toss is next. Look at me, dragging Gert to the starting line. You need to match the speed of your spin on screen with the D-pad, then hold the A button to get close to a 45-degree angle. If you can get your speed up and a good angle, you can get a huge distance. Look at that cave lady fly. The Dino Vault has you set the height you need to clear, then bash the A button as fast as you can. When you reach the chasm, press the B button and let go at the proper time to launch yourself up and over. If you're not quite good enough, you'll either get eaten by the T-Rex or fall down the chasm to your doom. The Dino Race has you once again mashing the A button and jumping over obstacles with the B button. You need to be early with your jump or you will fall into the obstacle and lose precious time as you run back to your mount. A well-timed turbo by bashing your dinosaur in the head by pressing right will give you an advantage. Fire Start tasks you with starting a campfire. In a wild turn of events, you need to mash the A button to rub 2 sticks together. Once sparks start falling, press down a few times to start the fire. Then it's a race to press up to fill your lungs and down to grow the fire. You can try to bash your opponent on the head with the B button for an advantage, but your opponent is good at ducking. The final event is the Saber Chase, where a saber-toothed tiger is out to get you. Once again, mash the A button to run, jump over obstacles with the B button, and press the D-pad to throw your opponent backward. Score enough points, and be the greatest cave athlete in the world. When it comes to grading caveman games on NES, graphics get a 2.5. The graphics are quite charming, and each caveman has a different sprite, which was nice. Sound gets 2.0. Music is sparse, and the sound effects are serviceable. Gameplay gets 3.0. Each game works great outside of the Saber Chase. Difficulty gets a 3.0. It took me 3 playthroughs to get to the point that I understood and excelled at most of the games. Fun factor gets a 3.0. I enjoyed myself to a high degree. This is the best minigame compilation I think I've played so far. Overall, Caveman Games earns a 2.7 and gets a B-. This is so much better than all the other games in its genre. It shows that if you put some time and creativity into something, even the oddest titles can be good. Take part in a plot of fratricide in Legendary Acts 2. This is supposed to be a sequel to the original Legendary Axe, but the localizers couldn't have cared less on linking the two titles. You are Prince Sirius, and your brother Prince Zack used the powers of evil to take over the kingdom after the death of the king and queen, with evil continuing to seep in from all over. It's up to you to fight through 7 levels to the royal palace and stop your brother by any means necessary. We're treated to another action platformer where Sirius can jump with button 1 and attack with button 2. This is a really straightforward title. For most of the game, there isn't much variety in enemies. They just run on screen and you need to kill them before they can attack you. Some of them go down in one shot, while others take multiple swipes. Luckily, you can power up your weapon by collecting one of 3 icons. You start with a sword, which gives you a good arc of attacking range from above you to the ground. The sickle and chain gives you some more range, but is more targeted in attack direction. The legendary axe is extra powerful, but isn't quite as wide-reaching as the sword. Enemies drop your weapon upgrades and can help you out by dropping other power-ups. The most useful are single health point restoring half moons. Those, alongside magic bombs, are the most prevalent items dropped. More rarely, you can find items that restore your entire health bar, grant you an increase to your maximum health bar, and give you extra lives. Enemies don't seem to respawn and held the same items between lives, leading me to believe that enemies have the same items in each playthrough. Most enemies were simple to get through, but there were some that I really didn't like. Some of these goobers would throw out magic bombs that you need to hit or run off screen before it explodes, or else you get hurt. I also really hated the boss of level 6 that shows up as a regular enemy in the final level. The skeleton that deflects your attacks is annoying as well. Some levels are maze-like, requiring you to find the correct path to the boss. The last level is a particularly difficult maze that took me many tries and lives to get to the end. Others have you going vertically and navigating falling floors and falling. A lot. Bosses are most easily beaten by rushing them and not really playing defense. As long as you have a lot of health, you should be able to put them away before they can end you. Except for the guy with the ball and chain. Once you kill him, you need to take the bouncing ball out too. When I got to the final boss, I used the run button to throw all 10 of my magic bombs before hacking away to finish him off. When it comes to grading Legendary Axe 2 on TurboGrafx 16, graphics get a 2.5. Sprites and backgrounds don't look bad, but Sirius does look quite muddy. Sound gets a 2.5. I didn't love the music and sound effects, but I didn't have a problem with them. Gameplay gets a 3.0. The game plays smoothly. It's not deep, but it's solid. Difficulty gets 2.5. Levels are mostly straightforward and fair. The maze levels are more annoying, though. Fun factor gets a 3.0. I liked my playthrough. It wasn't my favorite game, but it's one of the better TurboGrafx 16 games I've played. Overall, Legendary Axe 2 earns a 2.7 and gets a B-. The original may have scored better based on when it came out, but I think this is a better game. Give it a shot. Stop the bad gremlins from causing too much trouble in Gremlins 2, the new batch. After being cooped up in the Clamp Genetics lab for far too long, Gizmo is discovered by Billy. Happily reunited, Gizmo is hidden in Billy's desk while he's called away, but the curious little Mogwai doesn't stay put for long. Now Gizmo has to platform his way through 5 stages with your help. We get a top-down view like we've seen in Blaster Master and Fester's Quest before. Gizmo has the ability to jump with the A button, which is new. On each stage, Gizmo has a different weapon that he attacks with the B button. He begins with tomatoes, then upgrades to matches, paper clips, bow and arrow, and fiery bow and arrow. When killing enemies, they will drop crystal balls that you need to collect to purchase useful upgrades from Mr. Wing's shop. Hey, I thought he was dead. Gizmo has his health measured by hearts at the top of the screen. Each hit takes half a heart, and enemies do not drop health pickups. The only way you can replenish health is by purchasing a life recovery item or heart from Mr. Wing. You can also purchase a power pack, which increases the ability of your weapon. You can also buy a balloon that saves you if you fall down a pit, or an extra life. You aren't granted any extra lives to begin with, so if you die, you have to continue from the beginning of the stage. Any power-ups you've gained until that point are lost. The main challenge comes from platforming. There are plenty of obstacles that Gizmo must jump over or avoid. Spikes, moving platforms, electric squares, Morning Star skip-its, and so much more. Jumping pits from moving platforms gets real old real quick. Enemy gremlins exist too, but are usually pretty simple, if you get a good angle on them. Are those killer tomatoes? Good luck shooting diagonally while standing still. Enemies will rarely drop an item other than a crystal ball. The pogo stick gives you limited time invincibility. The flashbulb destroys all enemies on screen. The stopwatch freezes all enemies for a moment. At the end of the stage is a boss. These bosses aren't very sophisticated and require you to dodge them while pumping them full of your current weapon. The final gremlin has massive spider legs and will probably make you wet your pants if you're scared of spiders. When it comes to grading Gremlins 2, the new batch on NES, graphics get a 2.5. The cutscenes look really good, and the levels are fine, but there is some telltale flickering. Sound gets a 3.0. The music is all pretty good, certainly sophisticated as I expect from Sunsoft. Gameplay gets 3.0. Gizmo controls decently, but I had a ton of trouble facing diagonal if not moving. Difficulty gets a 3.0. Unlimited continues, a password after each stage, and only a few levels. You'll be able to get through it easily. Fun factor gets a 3.0. Easy to beat in less than an hour means it didn't outstay its welcome. I liked it enough for sure. Overall, Gremlins 2 the new batch earns a 2.9 and gets a B. This is a good game that should bring plenty of enjoyment for players young and old. Fight your way through enemies and avenge your father in ninja spirit. Evil ninjas have killed your father right before your eyes. Luckily, you've been trained in the art of ninjutsu and you're pissed. Travel through 7 levels, killing every enemy in your path, growing strong, and gaining revenge. Do you have what it takes? You take the role of Moonlight. You come equipped with 4 ninja weapons, each with particular strength. Each weapon can be upgraded for greater range or more projectiles. The sword is short range and can deflect incoming projectiles. The throwing knife is great for rapid fire attacks. The bomb has a ton of explosive power. The sickle and chain has a massive range and can deflect enemy knives and bombs. When powered up, you can swing it around as well. You can also gain 2 shadows that follow your movement and attack when you do. 2 shadows with powered up throwing knives is completely unfair and my go-to weapon. Levels are straightforward and require you to run to the right or jump to the top of the stage to encounter a boss enemy. If you choose PC Engine mode at the beginning, you get 5 hit points. Most attacks take 1 or 2 hit points away, but some enemies can still kill you in 1 hit. Arcade mode is a 1-hit death always, but I didn't bother playing it that way. Orange ninjas drop the items you need for upgrading weapons and gaining spirits, but also drop screen clearing items and the wheel of fire that makes your body a weapon. Having to chuck bombs to kill enemies on the other side of a ceiling or floor is an interesting mechanic to have to master. Another level has you moving quickly to avoid a falling ceiling. You have to master climbing the trees and taking out enemies while you're at it. Some enemies come equipped with guns that can put a quick end to your day if you're not careful. Having to jump up a cliff face isn't out of the question. I found very little problem with the bosses of each stage. If I bombarded them with throwing knives or bombs, they went down pretty quickly. The lousiest part of the game came right before the final boss, and you had to jump down a chasm full of ninjas that, if you touched, would kill you instantly. Luckily, the final boss was a pushover with bombs, giving us our revenge on who killed poor old Dad. When it comes to grading Ninja Spirit on TurboGrafx 16, graphics get a 3.0. Everything looks very detailed and explosions look extra nice. There is some slowdown when lots of effects are on screen at once. Sound gets a 3.0. Music and sounds complement the action and aren't overpowering or annoying. Gameplay gets a 3.5. Controls are pretty tight. You have options on what your favorite weapon will be. It's pretty well done. Difficulty gets a 3.5. Choose your difficulty and become a ninja master with enough practice. Dying loses all of your upgrades, so stay alive. Fun factor gets 3.5. I like playing through this one a lot. I could see myself coming back for a quick, enjoyable playthrough. Overall, Ninja Spirit earns a 3.3 and gets a B+. I like when I come across a fun game I've never been exposed to. I'll bet TurboGrafx diehards already know all about it. But if you don't, now you do. Well, that's going to do it for me for today. Please make sure to like this video and let me know in the comments if you agree with my rankings. What would you have at number 1 in this list? And please subscribe to Head Drop Productions on YouTube because we want you here for each and every video we release. Because it is your destiny.